All right, buckle up everyone, because today we're diving deep into a world that's both exhilarating and, let's be honest, a little bit nerve-wracking, especially if you're new to it.
Hitting the road for the first time.
Exactly. Getting that driver's license is a huge milestone, but as we all know, driver's ed only scratches the surface.
Yeah, it's just the beginning, right?
There's a whole universe of practical knowledge, those unwritten rules of the road, and, let's not forget, the social pressures that come with being a new
Which
driver.
nobody really prepares you for.
And that's where this deep dive comes in. We're cracking open the driving book, everything new drivers need to know but don't know to ask, to extract the absolute must-know advice, the stuff that could save you from a roadside headache, an awkward social situation, or even worse.
And trust me, this book goes way beyond the basics. It's like a secret handbook for navigating the world of driving.
And we're talking about everything from a super simple trick using a penny to tell if your tires are worn out.
A penny, really.
Oh yeah, and we'll get to that. And then there's the dangers of driving with your furry friend hanging out the window, which, by the way, is way riskier than most people think.
Speaking of risky, we'll also be diving into strategies for handling peer pressure when you're behind the wheel, because saying no can be tough, but it's absolutely crucial.
So think of this deep dive as your ultimate road trip companion, guiding you through all the twists and turns of becoming a confident and safe driver.
I'm ready to hit the road.
Me too.
Yeah.
Let's kick things off right where every driving adventure begins.
In the garage.
You got it. We're talking car essentials, those must-haves that every new driver needs to have on board. Now, I know you've already heard the basics a million times.
License, registration, insurance.
Yep, those are non-negotiables.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting. Think of your insurance card as your driving lifeline. In an accident, it's the first thing you'll need. And fumbling through your glove compartment isn't exactly a good look.
Especially when you're already stressed out after an accident.
Keep it easily accessible, maybe slip it in your wallet, or even take a picture on your phone. That way, you're prepared and in control no matter what happens.
Smart thinking. And speaking of being prepared, let's talk about that spare tire lurking in your trunk.
Oh yeah, the trusty spare. The book really hammers home the importance of having it inflated. It's like that fire extinguisher tucked away in your kitchen.
Mm.
Better to have it and not need it than need it and have it be useless.
It's so easy to forget about until you're stranded on the side of the road with a flat tire.
And that's a situation you want to avoid at all costs. Another lifesaver, especially for new drivers, those jumper cables.
Oh yeah, those can come in handy.
Have you ever had to jump start a car?
I haven't personally, but I've seen it done.
It can seem a little intimidating at first, but honestly, knowing how to use jumper cables safely can save you tons of time, money, and hassle if your battery decides to take an unexpected nap.
Definitely worth learning. And speaking of batteries, those portable battery chargers are becoming pretty popular, aren't they?
They are. It's like having your own personal roadside assistance tucked away in your glove compartment.
You don't need another car to give you a jump. You're totally independent.
And while we're on the topic of safety essentials, the driving book also reminds us about the importance of having a good flashlight, especially for those late-night breakdowns when visibility is low.
Makes sense.
And they even mention having a tool specifically designed for breaking your windshield.
Wow, for like emergency situations?
Exactly. It's not the most cheerful thought, but better to be prepared for the unexpected than caught off guard.
I agree. You never know what might happen out there on the road.
Okay, now that we've got our emergency kit sorted out, let's shift gears and talk about car maintenance.
The stuff that keeps our cars running smoothly.
Exactly. This is where a lot of new drivers might start to feel a bit lost, like they're wandering through a jungle of engine parts and confusing terminology.
It can be overwhelming.
But the driving book really breaks it down into a language that anyone can understand. They emphasize the importance of being proactive with car care.
Instead of waiting for something to break down.
Right. And they highlight things that new drivers might not even think about, like checking your oil level regularly.
Oh, that's essential.
It's so simple, but it can make a huge difference in the lifespan of your car. Imagine your car's engine is like your heart, and the oil is its lifeblood, keeping everything running smoothly.
I like that analogy.
Checking the oil is as easy as using that little dipstick, and getting into the habit of doing it regularly will prevent major headaches down the road.
Speaking of headaches, the book also talks about those warning signs that your car battery might be on its last legs.
Like what? What should we be listening for?
Well, they mention things like a groaning sound when you start your car,
Oh, I've definitely heard that before.
or if the engine turns over multiple times before it finally catches.
Those are definitely red flags.
And while we're on the topic of things that can leave you stranded, let's not forget about our lights. Headlights, taillights, brake lights, turn signals.
Everything.
Not only are they crucial for safety, but a burned out taillight can actually get your car towed.
The book tells this funny story about this driver who thought they would just get a warning for a couple of burned out taillights.
Yeah.
The officer ended up calling a tow truck.
Wow, they weren't messing around.
It's a good reminder to pay attention to the little things. They can have big consequences. Now let's talk about those windshield wipers.
Windshield wipers.
Yeah, they might seem pretty basic, but they're your best friends on those rainy or snowy days.
Can't argue with that.
And worn-out wipers don't just leave streaks on your windshield, they can actually scratch the glass.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that can be a costly repair. The driving book recommends replacing your wipers at least once a year, more often if you park outside, exposed to the elements.
It's a simple thing to do that can make a big difference.
Okay, now for that penny trick I mentioned earlier.
The tire tread test.
You got it. It's so simple, yet so effective. You take a penny and insert it head first into the tread groove of your tire.
Head first, okay.
And if you can see all of Lincoln's head, well, it's time for new tires.
That's a great visual.
Right. But why is tire tread so important?
Well, think of it this way. Your tire tread is what grips the road, especially when it's wet or slippery. Proper tread depth gives you control, helps you stop safely, and prevents those scary skids.
And it directly impacts your stopping distance, which is something every driver, especially new drivers, needs to be super aware of.
Speaking of tires, let's not forget about tire pressure.
Another one of those things that's easy to overlook.
But underinflated tires can lead to blowouts, which can be super dangerous.
And overinflated tires can make your car feel like you're riding a bouncy horse.
Not exactly a smooth ride.
The book recommends checking your tire pressure monthly. It's a quick and easy thing to do that can save you a lot of trouble down the line.
Absolutely. And while we're on the topic of preventative maintenance, don't forget about those other essential fluids.
Fluids?
Yeah, your brake fluid, power steering fluid, transmission fluid, they all play a crucial role in keeping your car running smoothly.
I remember my first car. I had no idea where to even find those fluids, let alone check them.
Don't worry, your owner's manual is your best friend here. It'll show you exactly where to find everything and how to check the levels.
Or, if you're more of a visual learner, ask a mechanic to walk you through it.
They're usually happy to help.
And don't forget those belts and hoses under the hood. Regularly checking them for cracks or wear and tear can prevent those dreaded breakdowns.
So much better than being stuck on the side of the road.
All right, so we've got our car essentials. We're on top of maintenance. What's next?
Time to hit the road.
Let's go. But before we actually get behind the wheel, there are a few essential driving tips every new driver needs to have in their back pocket.
Bring on those driving skills.
Coming up after the break. Okay, so we're back, and now it's time to really get into the nitty-gritty of driving. Those essential skills that will make you feel confident and safe behind the wheel.
And this is where the driving book really shines. It goes beyond those basic rules and dives into the mindset, the habits, the awareness that truly makes someone a good driver.
It's all about being proactive and anticipating those potential hazards before they've even become a problem.
Right. Like thinking ahead, not just reacting to what's happening right in front of you.
Exactly. And one of the first things the book emphasizes is the importance of time management when it comes to driving.
Time management. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Think about it. When you're rushing, stressed, in a hurry, you're way more likely to make impulsive decisions, to miss those important cues. Like that car slowing down ahead or a pedestrian about to cross the street.
You might overreact to unexpected situations too, right?
Exactly. It's a recipe for disaster. So plan your trips, leave a little extra time, and arrive at your destination relaxed and one piece.
Much better than arriving stressed and in a fender bender.
And speaking of things that can take your focus away from the road, the driving book goes beyond just the obvious dangers of texting while driving.
Texting's a no-brainer, you just don't do it.
Right. But even those seemingly harmless things can be distractions. Like adjusting the radio, messing with the climate control, even spacing out and daydreaming.
Oh, yeah. I'm totally guilty of that, especially on long drives. It's like suddenly I realize I haven't been paying attention for the last 5 minutes.
Same here. It's something we all have to be mindful of. When your mind is somewhere else, you're not fully present, you're not fully aware of your surroundings, and that's when accidents happen.
Speaking of things we need to be super aware of, let's talk about speeding.
Yes, the need for speed.
The book doesn't hold back on this one. They cite all sorts of scary statistics about accidents and injuries related to speeding. It's a serious issue.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of going with the flow, especially when everyone else on the road is speeding.
Yeah, you feel like you're holding everyone up.
But remember, those speed limits are there for a reason. They're based on road conditions, the safety of everyone.
And ultimately, you're responsible for your own actions, right?
Right, no matter what other drivers are doing. Now, let's talk about a concept that new drivers might not be as familiar with. Maintaining a safe following distance. You know, that space cushion between you and the car in front of you.
Ah, the 2-second rule?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Leave enough space so that you have time to react if the car in front of you brakes suddenly. You don't want to be playing bumper cars out there.
And that space cushion becomes even more important when conditions are bad. Like if
Yeah.
it's raining or snowing.
Absolutely. It gives you that extra time to react. And speaking of things that can sneak up on you, let's talk about blind spots.
Blind spots, yeah. Those are the areas around your car that you can't see in your mirrors, right?
Exactly. And every car has them, so it's crucial to be aware of them and to always do a quick head check. You know, that glance over your shoulder before changing lanes.
I remember my driving instructor drilling that into us. Mirrors, signal, shoulder check.
It becomes second nature after a while, but it's so important. That quick glance can prevent a serious accident.
Now, another thing that can mess with your visibility, glare, especially when the sun is low in the sky.
Sunglasses definitely help, but what are some other tips for dealing with glare?
The book emphasizes the importance of keeping your windshield clean.
Both inside and out.
Right, because dirt and smudges can scatter light, making the glare even worse.
It's amazing what a difference a clean windshield can make.
It's like looking through a brand new window.
Now, let's talk about something that can be just as dangerous as driving under the influence. Fatigue. Driving when you're tired.
Oh yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that. Trying to push through that exhaustion on a long drive.
It can be really tempting. But it's so important to recognize those signs of fatigue, the yawning, the heavy eyelids, that feeling of drifting out of your lane.
If you experience any of those, pull over immediately.
Better to be safe than sorry. Even a short nap can make a world of difference.
And your passengers will thank you for it. Now let's talk about intersections. They can be tricky, especially for new drivers with all the different directions, traffic signals, pedestrians.
It's a lot to process.
And the driving book stresses the importance of being super cautious, even when you have the green light.
Really? Why?
Well, you never know when someone might run a red light, make an unexpected turn, or suddenly dart across the street. It's about being proactive, not just reacting.
So even if you have the green light, don't just blindly zoom through the intersection.
Take a moment to scan the area, make eye contact with other drivers if possible, and be prepared to react if something unexpected happens.
It's like that old saying, look both ways before crossing the street.
Exactly. Even if you have the walk signal, you still need to be aware of your surroundings. Now, one concept that I found really helpful in the driving book is this idea of always having an escape route.
An escape route, like in case of an emergency.
Exactly. It's about being aware of your surroundings and having a plan in case you need to make a quick maneuver to avoid a collision.
So constantly assessing your options, thinking, okay, if that car suddenly cuts me off, could I swerve to the left? Or if a pedestrian steps into the road, could I brake safely without hitting the car in front of me?
Right. Having that mental map of your surroundings can make all the difference in those split-second decisions.
It's like that defensive driving mindset, always being one step ahead.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of essential driving tips. But driving isn't just about handling the car, it's about navigating those social situations that come with it, those tricky interactions with passengers, parents, even friends.
Oh yeah, the social side of driving can be a minefield.
And that's what we'll be diving into after the break.
We're back, and the road ahead is looking pretty interesting, to say the least. We've covered so much ground in our deep dive into the driving book, from car essentials and maintenance to handling those tricky social situations. But this last stretch is all about the unexpected.
The what ifs, right?
Exactly. Those curveballs that life throws at you when you least expect it, especially when you're behind the wheel. We're talking breakdowns, accidents, those times when you see someone else in need of help.
It's like our emergency preparedness kit for new drivers.
Exactly. And the driving book really lays it out in a clear, practical way, giving you the tools and the knowledge to handle these situations with confidence. So first up, let's talk about breakdowns.
Because let's face it, they happen to all of us at some point.
Oh yeah, it doesn't matter if you have a brand new car or a vintage classic.
Something's bound to go wrong eventually.
And the book does a fantastic job of breaking down those common culprits. The dead battery, the flat tire, the overheated engine.
Things that can leave you stranded on the side of the road, wondering what to do next.
But here's the thing. The driving book doesn't just tell you what can go wrong. It gives you those step-by-step instructions for handling some of these situations yourself.
It's so empowering.
Isn't it? Instead of feeling helpless, you're like, okay, I got this.
Yeah.
Like, imagine you're out with friends, and suddenly your battery decides to call it quits. You pop the hood, grab those jumper cables we talked about earlier, and bam, you're back on the road.
No need to call for a tow truck.
And the book walks you through the whole process. Safely, of course, which is super important.
Safety first, always.
Now, I know changing a tire can seem pretty daunting, especially if you've never done it before.
I remember the first time I tried, it felt like I was wrestling with a giant rubber monster.
But the driving book breaks it down into these easy-to-follow steps, reminding you about all those little safety precautions that can make a world of difference. Like making sure the car is on a level surface, setting the parking brake, using those wheel wedges.
The little things that can prevent a big accident.
Right. But let's be real. Sometimes, even with the best preparation, you need to call in the cavalry.
You mean roadside assistance?
Exactly. It's like having a guardian angel for your car. You break down, you call them, and they swoop in to save the day.
Worth every penny, especially for those moments when you're feeling stranded and alone.
And speaking of essential tools, let's not forget the most important one of all, your cell phone. Keep it charged, keep it handy, because even with all the preparation in the world, sometimes you just need to call for help. Okay, now, let's talk about accidents. I know it's not something anyone wants to think about.
It's one of those things you hope will never happen, but statistically speaking, most drivers will experience an accident at some point in their lives.
And the driving book doesn't sugarcoat it. It acknowledges that accidents can be traumatic experiences, both physically and emotionally. But what I appreciate is that it also equips you with a framework for responding effectively in those moments when you might feel overwhelmed and unsure of what to do. So let's break it down. What are those first crucial steps after an accident?
First and foremost, check for injuries. Your own, your passengers, anyone else involved. If there are injuries, call 911 immediately. Then, if it's safe to do so, move your car out of the flow of traffic. Turn on your hazard lights to alert other drivers and wait for the police to arrive.
Clear, concise instructions that can make all the difference in those chaotic moments. And remember those insurance details we talked about earlier?
Names, addresses, policy numbers.
It's crucial to exchange that information with the other driver involved, even if it seems like a minor fender bender.
And the book stresses this really important point. Resist the urge to apologize or admit fault at the scene, even if you think you might be partially to blame.
Let the police and the insurance companies sort that out.
Your focus should be on safety and gathering information. Now, speaking of insurance, remember that thing we talked about earlier? No-fault insurance.
Yeah, I still feel a little fuzzy on that one.
Well, it basically means that your insurance company will cover your expenses up to a certain limit, regardless of who caused the accident.
So it's like a safety net.
In a way, yes, but it's important to remember that if you are found at fault, your insurance premiums might go up and the other driver's insurance company might come knocking.
Looking for reimbursement.
Exactly. So even with no-fault insurance, it's still crucial to drive defensively and avoid accidents. And here's another thing the book mentions. Sometimes the other driver might try to pressure you into not reporting the accident, especially if they don't have insurance or are worried about the consequences.
It can be tempting to just agree and avoid the hassle, but it's important to remember that following the proper procedures is the best way to protect yourself in the long run.
And it ensures that everyone involved is held accountable for their actions. Now, beyond those practical steps, one thing that really resonated with me in the driving book was how they acknowledge the emotional impact of accidents.
Yeah, accidents can be really traumatic, even if there are no serious injuries.
It's normal to feel shaken up, scared, maybe even a little guilty.
And the book encourages you to take the time to process those feelings, whether it's talking to a trusted friend, a family member, or even a therapist. Give yourself permission to feel those emotions and work through them.
Okay, so we've talked about breakdowns, we've talked about accidents. Now let's talk about those times when you're driving along and you see someone else in trouble, like a stranded motorist.
I used to think it was always the right thing to do to pull over and offer help. Like a good Samaritan.
It's a natural instinct to want to help, but the driving book actually advises caution, especially for new drivers or those who are driving alone.
Really? Why is that?
Unfortunately, there are people out there who prey on those good intentions. They might stage a breakdown to lure unsuspecting drivers into dangerous situations. It's a sad reality.
It is, but it's important to be aware of those risks. So
True.
instead of stopping, what does the book recommend?
They say it's best to drive to a safe location and call the police to report the stranded motorist. That way, you're ensuring help arrives without putting yourself in harm's way. And if you witness an accident, the same advice applies.
If emergency responders are already there.
Exactly. Don't stop, don't add to the chaos. But if you're the first to arrive at an accident scene, here's what the driving book recommends.
Call 911 immediately.
Then, without putting yourself in danger, assess the situation and offer assistance if it's safe to do so. Remember those first aid basics. If someone's injured, don't try to move them unless it's absolutely necessary. Focus on keeping them calm, comfortable, and reassure them that help is on the way.
Wow, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from those everyday driving essentials to those more serious what-if situations. It's been quite a journey.
And through it all, the driving book has been our trusty guide. It's packed with practical advice and real-life stories, presented in a way that makes it both informative and engaging. It's not just a dry rule book, it's like having a conversation with a seasoned driver, sharing their wisdom and experience.
And for all those new drivers out there, remember this. Driving is a continuous learning experience. The road ahead is full of challenges and surprises, but with the right mindset, a healthy dose of caution, and a willingness to keep learning, you can navigate it with confidence and skill. So keep those eyes on the road, stay curious, and never stop exploring.
Safe travels, everyone.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.